Hello, welcome to the Roundtable, a new series of the Overseas Ministry Study Center. My name is Trolio, and we get to interview scholars and students of world Christianity from around the world, and I have the pleasure of having Dr. Gina Zurlo. Thank you for coming.
Happy to be here.
Just some questions, just to get to know you. Would you mind sharing sort of your background, your academic training, and how you got to the PhD, and what was your research on during your PhD research?
Sure. So I'm going to share with you something I actually rarely share, which is that my undergrad is in music education.
No way.
Yes. And the reason I share this is because I think there are a lot of people who just have different life journeys and different turns in the road. Sure. And you may be on one road and you want to get to another road and you think, how can I possibly get from here to there?
Yeah.
Well, I was a music education major and I ended up a world Christianity scholar.
So how did you go from the music education into world Christianity?
So in my last semester of my undergrad, I decided on a whim to work with a Jewish studies professor. I was at Ithaca College in New York to do some ethnographic research about Jewish liturgical music in synagogues.
Oh, wow.
So I started to learn about qualitative research and ethnography and participant observation, and I was going into all these synagogues in upstate New York and listening to the music and how this one particular tune was being used in different Jewish traditions. And I remember going back to this Jewish studies professor and I was like, I found the thing I want to do with the rest of my life, which is research, but I've just spent the last 4 years doing music ed. Am I doomed? Right? I was like 20 years old.
Sure.
And she's like, no, you're not doomed. And she actually told me, you know, for her undergrad, her master's, and her PhD were all in 3 completely different fields.
Wow.
And it actually really resonated with me to think like, okay, there is some flexibility in this academic space to kind of figure out who you are along the way. So I ended up doing a master's in religion, and then that's where I encountered the World Christian Database and the quantitative research tradition, which really just struck me a lot, that you can study the world this way. And I had, you know, had that little taste of research, and then when I got to quant, it was like a marriage made in heaven that this thing was for me, which is funny because I was a music major, right? I didn't do statistics. I wasn't even very good at math, to be totally honest. And now I run the largest quantitative research tradition in world Christianity studies.
Amazing. Yeah. That's the full journey.
That's right.
And where are you now?
So now I'm a visiting lecturer in world Christianity at Harvard Divinity School.
And I know we were talking before on camera that you're teaching. What are some of the courses that you've taught or are teaching? What sort of projects are involved right now with what you're doing presently? Yeah,
I like to teach big picture trends in my courses, partly because a lot of people still don't know about world Christianity. And so I feel like we need these big courses, overarching narratives where we can do a little bit about what's happening all around the world. So at Harvard, I've taught trends in world Christianity. I'm currently teaching women in world Christianity. I've also taught the history of Pentecostal charismatic Christianity, which is, of course, a large part of world Christianity, the fastest growing. And I'm working on a new class right now on global religious change, which is history, demographics, political science, sociology, religion, and a lot of we talk a lot about the demographic shift of Christianity in Global South, but like, how did that actually happen? And what other large-scale changes have happened in world religions over the last 20th century? And how have they changed? And what might we be able to anticipate in the future?
I know every year I eagerly await this sort of article that I think it's usually at the beginning of the
annual statistical table in the International Bulletin of Mission Research.
I always, I eagerly, because it's a good sort of distillation of all these bigger sort of things happening. You recently published this year's.
Just in January.
Could you tell us a little bit about that, sort of, not go into the nitty gritty, but the big sort of things that you noticed in this research from this year?
So this year for the 2025 table, our research cycle is on these big 5-year cycles. So for 2025, we had brand new 2025 base year data. So we decided to do essentially like just a geographic overview. So we take each continent, Asia, Africa, Latin America, Oceania, and talk about what are the major trends that are happening in world Christianity and other religions on each of these continents. So I think it's actually a really good article this year as like a stake in the ground. This is where we're starting, reflecting on the past, but also in this 5-year period, kind of where things are going from here.
And I believe, because I did read it, but I don't want to misremember, but there was some data showing growth and decrease across the world in relationship to Christianity, right? But could you give me some like little tidbits from that finding? Because I remember reading it, but I didn't remember.
Sure.
So I don't want to make up stuff.
So generally, the shift of Christianity to the global south is continuing. So we're seeing the growth of Christianity primarily in sub-Saharan Africa and certain places in Asia. We're seeing a bit of stasis in Latin America. We are seeing continued decline in Oceania because Australia, New Zealand, a lot of the demographic weight kind of works in their favor. But the Pacific Islands are still very, very Christian, over 90% for most of the Pacific Islands. And then we are seeing the decline of Christianity in the Western world, Europe and North America. So those are kind of the big picture trends, but there's a lot of nuance that is happening within that. And lots of big questions that we're still looking at, like China and India, what's happening there, the religious switching in Latin America, the double affiliation, right, between Catholics and Pentecostals, and there's been a lot of work on the United States. We actually project that, so the United States has been the country with the most Christians for a long, long time, but by 2075, it's actually going to be the Democratic Republic of the Congo will be the country with the most Christians in the world.
Wow.
That's a different kind of world Christianity, I think. So that's something that we should all be paying attention to.
Well, even just the shift to the global south, and I remember, during my comprehensive exams, going back through the historiography and everybody being like, well, what does this mean? And obviously the scholarship was lagging behind the actual trends. But yeah, I think you just saying, what if Democratic Republic of Congo has the most Christians? What does that mean? And how do we think of the future of Christianity when its center is, Africa? We just talked a little bit about recent publications, but I know that you've been working on a few books, projects. Could you talk a little bit about some of the recent publications you've done with books? We did talk about journals, so you could talk about books.
Sure. So the Edinburgh Companions to Global Christianity 10-volume series is finished.
Wow.
I do not recommend a 10-year book project, to be completely honest.
Okay.
It's a lot of work over a long period of time.
Noted.
But the 10th volume is called the Compact Atlas of Global Christianity, which is somewhat of an update of the 2009 atlas that we came out with. And it was really fun to put together because we essentially started from scratch of like, what do we want to visualize? What kinds of new data can we put into conversation with the data in the World Christian Database? What moments are we responding to today? So there's a lot of new data in there. All of the 2025 data, the new projections to 2075 are in that book also. And it also just looks really beautiful. We had a very talented graphic design team and cartographer to put together really attractive graphics.
Can you talk a little bit about when you do these projects? I know I'm not a numbers person, but just generally, like, what is methodologically, what does that look like?
So for this particular project, we were following the pattern of the series, which were each of the 9 volumes, which cover a different region in the world, have authors from these regions talking about their regions. So for the Atlas, we made sure to have an African scholar talking about African Christianity, an Asian scholar writing the Asian essay, a Catholic scholar writing about Catholicism, etc. And then what my job is to follow that with the demographics to say, for you to understand what's happening in world Catholicism, what stats would I put forward to help contextualize or provide that big picture narrative that this author is talking about? So a lot of it is kind of our standard, the status of what's happening right now in terms of where it's growing, declining, the change over time, and the projections to the future. But for this atlas, in the third piece of the book is what we call key themes. So that's where you get data on like urbanization and religion in cities and the future of world Christianity. And we added information on LGBTQ and religion worldwide. And of course, gender is a huge piece. So we're just trying.
Your work especially.
Yes. We make sure not to just have gender be a fringe thing that some people think about, but we're trying to bring it into the core of what it means to actually understand what's happening in world Christianity. You have to understand what's happening among the world's Christian women.
That's exciting. I'll definitely check that out. I hadn't seen that. So that's what's passed. What are you currently working on? I'd love to hear sort of a little bit of your ongoing research or topics, or maybe the topic still to be, or what's next on the horizon, or even presently.
Yeah, there's a few things going on. One project I'm working on is on global evangelicalism.
Okay.
Which is an interesting tradition to talk about. I think in some ways it's the most complex of the Christian traditions because of the different understandings of this word evangelical worldwide. So what it means in the US context is different than in the Latin American context, different than the Chinese context.
Everybody's evangelical.
Everyone is evangelical.
At least by name.
Yeah. Or no one is an evangelical. And so the reality is somewhere in between.
Yeah.
So especially since 2016, this term has gotten really contentious, and I've been fielding a lot of requests about evangelical data, and it really convinced me that I need to do some work on this globally to see how is this word being used globally, and how does that impact the demographics. So I'm working on a big project to essentially research in the world's largest Christian countries, how this word is being used, and then what the numbers are. Yeah. And can we create maybe concentric circles of evangelicalism to give us a better idea of what this looks like? So it's really complex, and I just hope I don't hit a wall with it, to be completely honest, but that's part of the research process.
Oh, that's exciting.
Trying to figure it out.
Off camera, we were talking a little bit about the state of the field of, mission studies, world Christianity. Sort of three questions. The first one is, what is your sort of assessment? What do you see it kind of evolving into the future? And what do you see as some of the challenges?
Yeah. I love world Christianity. I think it's a really interesting field. And one thing I love most about it is its interdisciplinarity. Everyone in world Christianity is something else in addition to world Christianity. So your history, world Christianity, your political science, world Christianity, your quant, world Christianity, right? Social science. And I think that's a real strength of the field. Because there are so many other disciplines, methodologies, and methods that can be kind of reanalyzed and used through the world Christianity hermeneutic.
Sure.
So one thing that we see emerging now is political science and world Christianity because of all this discussion of Christian nationalism.
Sure.
A lot of the discussion about Christian nationalism has been very USA focused, but this is not a USA phenomenon only.
No.
I mean, there is Christian nationalism all over the world. And are we even seeing Christian nationalism among Christians who are minorities in countries where another religion is the majority? Yeah, I think we are going to see that.
Yeah.
So world Christianity can speak into this moment, I think, in a way that's really helpful and constructive for us to understand not just what's happening for Americans in this country, but how what happens in this country impacts other countries and vice versa. That's what we're really good at in world Christianity.
Yeah.
So I'm excited about that, and I think we can be doing it with other fields too.
Yeah.
One in particular I'd love to see more of is economic analyses of world Christianity.
Okay.
Because we have we have these tropes in world Christianity, right? Okay, so Christianity is shifting to the global south, which is generally poorer.
Yeah.
Okay, can we nuance that a little bit?
Yeah.
There is so much amazing economic work that's happening, and so if you look at the work of like Rachel McCleary and Robert Barrow, who've been doing economics of religion for a long time, can we pull that into world Christianity studies and see how the flow of money impacts Christianity, how that relates to mission, how it relates to production of theological education, how it relates to what we even hear about sitting here, right, in these chairs in Princeton. A lot of that's money, right?
Well, I remember one of the statistics you told me the last time we were together at the previous World Christianity, it had to do with corruption. And I forget, do you remember what I'm talking about?
I think so.
That it was that there's some huge portion of money that disappears.
Yes. That more money is stolen from churches than is given to mission every year in world Christianity. Yes.
And so that's a huge question, right? So you have the fact. Why?
Yeah.
Where is that coming? So I can.
Who's investigating that?
What do you see as some of the challenges, though? So this is that's sort of the future and what you would hope to see. What do you see as some of the challenges, or what's missing?
I think part of the challenge is just the general siloing of academia. So we have an interdisciplinary field, but we don't have an interdisciplinary academia. You can't apply to a PhD program and say, I'm going to be interdisciplinary. It doesn't quite work that way. And even the work that I did at Boston University, where I did my PhD, my mentor, Dana Robert, was really generous in helping me bend rules so that I could do the interdisciplinary work that I needed to do. But you are constantly pushing up against the structures of academia. So where can this kind of work happen? Where can you pair economics and world Christianity? So I think we have some thinking to do in our respective institutional locales of how to allow students to break those rules, essentially. And that's the only way that we make new discoveries. You have to be able to bend the rules, break the rules to make new discoveries in this field.
What do you see as currently, so I know you mentioned that, economics, but in sort of the current research, what are some things that you feel are missing? I know in one of the conferences we talked, you said the role, more research on women. This was a few years ago. And since then I felt like, there's been some small advances in that. But presently, when you sort of look at the landscape, what do you think is missing?
I still think women are missing, to be honest. I really do think women are still missing. And I think we have structural problems. Can I give you an example?
Please.
This is actually rather personal. So I have a 15-year-old daughter who's a freshman in high school, and she's taking world history for the first time. And her teacher is doing very little on women's history. And of course, I'm watching like a hawk. I'm watching like a hawk to see, what are you reading? What's going on? So little consciousness of gender in world history. And so this is a structural problem that is getting fed over time, right? And so by the time I get grad students at Harvard, they don't know a lot about women in world history either, right? Because of the structures that have decided somewhere along the line what is important to know in world history and what isn't. So this is still a structural problem that women in gender studies is still only done by a certain kind of scholar, a female scholar perhaps. We don't have enough men doing women in gender studies. And I think we need to, a colleague of mine at Harvard recently said, this is Raul Zagara, in order to do serious theological work, you have to take into consideration feminist theology. And I'm not sure that we have really fully incorporated this into the canon of world Christianity.
This is sort of an impromptu question, but I'm going to say a phrase, and then you got to give a one-word or two-word answer.
I'm nervous, but go ahead.
No. I mean, you can complete it. You can complete the sentence.
Okay.
But world Christianity is
big.
Okay.
That's my very scholarly response. It is. It's big. And it's also small. It's a big field in the sense that, 2.6 billion Christians in the world in all 237 countries, with all of its diversity, all of its history, all of its different relationships to politics and economic, it's huge. It is a huge thing. But there's actually so few people who are actually engaging it. So yes, it's big, but there's so much more work that we need to do.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Gina Zurlo, for joining us for the OMSC Roundtable.
Thanks for having me.